My family is complicit in Maura's disappearance. We know where she is. We helped her disappear.
New evidence has come to light in the disappearance of Maura Murray, providing a potential break in the infamous, decades-old cold case that points toward a former Army cadet with a violent, checkered past. A witness to the accident called police at 7:30 p.m., telling an operator that a young woman driving a black 1996 Saturn sedan had skidded off the road and into a ditch along Route 112. By the time police arrived on the scene 15 minutes later, Mora was nowhere to be found. Where she went and what happened to her next remains a complete mystery 21 years on. Mora's family has reluctantly accepted the idea that she's likely no longer alive. But contrary to early insinuations made by investigators, the Murray family insist Mora wasn't suicidal and they believe she was killed by an unknown perpetrator. What brought Mora to Haverhill that fateful night is also unknown. The days leading up to her disappearance were punctuated with strange and seemingly erratic behavior. Last week, Oxygen.com published some of the most compelling theories of what might have happened to Mora. On the first episode of the disappearance of Maura Murray, Mora's own family members, who rarely speak to the media, talked about what they think happened. Mora's sister, Mora's older sister by 2 years, Julie, said that she was very close to Mora. She revealed on Saturday's premiere of the show what she thinks might have happened. Something bad happened. Something went wrong. Her initial plan was maybe to go up there for whatever reason, no one knows, but then something happened and derailed that plan. If she was able to reach out and contact us and say, "Hey guys, stop worrying. I'm here. I'm fine," she definitely would have, but that didn't happen. When asked by investigative journalist Maggie Frilling why Mora left school and was driving up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, Julie responded, "My guess would be to take a couple days and clear her head, but it doesn't make sense to go up there alone." Julie said the last conversation she had with Mora appeared normal. In fact, she said Mora seemed excited about spring break plans, a trip to Myrtle Beach, that the sisters had together. That phone conversation took place less than 2 days before Mora vanished. That's why, when all this stuff happened, it completely surprised everyone, Julie admitted. She said she thinks the FBI should have been brought in from the beginning. Nobody had any answers and there were changes in the police reports, and it took forever for the police reports to be published. None of the police contacted me. I've never talked to the police and I'm her sister who was closest to her. Maura Murray, born May 4, 1982, is an American woman who disappeared on the evening of February 9, 2004, after a car crash on Route 112 near Woodsville, New Hampshire, a village in the town of Haverhill. Her whereabouts remain unknown. Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student completing her junior year at the University of Massachusetts Amherst at the time of her disappearance. On the afternoon of Monday, February 9, before she left the university campus, she emailed her professors and work supervisor, writing that she was taking a week off due to a death in the family. According to her family, there had not been a death. At 7:27 p.m., a local woman reported a car accident on a sharp corner of Route 112 adjacent to her home. A passing motorist who also lived nearby stopped at the scene and asked the woman driving the car if she needed assistance. She declined, claiming to have called roadside assistance. Upon arriving home several minutes later, the motorist reported the accident to emergency services. At 7:46 p.m., law enforcement arrived at the scene, but the woman had disappeared. Police traced the vehicle to Murray, and initially treated her as a missing person on the belief that she may have wanted to disappear voluntarily. This speculation was based on her travel preparations, about which she had confided nothing to friends or family, and no obvious evidence of foul play. In 2009, Murray's case was given to the New Hampshire Cold Case Division, and authorities are handling it as a suspicious, missing persons case. In the years after Murray's disappearance, her case would receive media attention on 2020 and Disappeared, and also garner significant speculation on internet message boards and forums. 6. With theories ranging from abduction to voluntary disappearance. In 2017, the case was the subject of a documentary series on the Oxygen network, which described Murray's disappearance as the first crime mystery of the social media age, having occurred days after the launch of Facebook. In November 2003, 3 months before her disappearance, Murray admitted to using a stolen credit card to order food from several restaurants, including one in Hadley, Massachusetts. The charge was continued in December, to be dismissed after 3 months' good behavior. On the evening of February 5, 2004, while she was on duty at her campus security job, Murray spoke on the phone with her older sister, Kathleen. They discussed Kathleen's relationship problems with her fiancé. Around 10:30 p.m., while still on her shift, Murray reportedly broke down in tears. When her supervisor arrived at her desk, Murray was just completely zoned out. No reaction at all. She was unresponsive. The supervisor escorted Murray back to her dorm room around 1:20 a.m. When asked what was wrong, Murray said 2 words: "My sister." The contents of this call remained unknown until October 2017, when Kathleen publicly explained the conversation. Kathleen, an alcoholic, had been discharged from a rehabilitation clinic that evening, and on the way home, her fiancé took her to a liquor store, which caused a relapse. On Saturday, February 7th, Murray's father Fred arrived in Amherst. He told investigators he and Murray went car shopping that afternoon, and later went to dinner with a friend of his daughter. Murray dropped her father off at his motel room and, borrowing his Toyota Corolla, returned to campus to attend a dorm party. She arrived at 10:30 p.m. At 2:30 a.m. on Sunday, February 8th, she left the party. At 3:30 a.m., en route to her father's motel, she struck a guardrail on Route 9 in Hadley, causing nearly $10,000, equivalent to $16,600 in 2024, worth of damage to her father's car. The responding officer wrote an accident report, but there is no documentation of field sobriety tests being conducted. Murray was driven to her father's motel and stayed in his room the rest of the morning. At 4:49 a.m., there was a cell phone call placed to her boyfriend from Fred's phone. The participants and content of the phone call remain unknown. Later Sunday morning, Fred learned the damage to his vehicle would be covered by his auto insurance. He rented a car, dropped Murray off at the university, and departed for Connecticut. At 11:30 that night, Fred called his daughter to remind her to obtain accident forms from the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles. They agreed to talk again Monday night to discuss the forms and fill out the insurance claim via phone. According to FBI. On Monday, February 9, 2004, at approximately 7:30 p.m., a black-colored Saturn four-door sedan vehicle, belonging to 21-year-old Maura Murray, traveled off Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, and became stuck. The roads in that area of northern New Hampshire were snow-covered at the time. Murray was not present at the crash scene when police arrived and has not been seen or heard from since. Murray was last seen on surveillance footage earlier in the day at an ATM wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Prior to that, Murray had left the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she was studying nursing. Murray did not share with others her pending trip to New Hampshire, which was about 2.5 hours away. Murray received prior education at the United States Military Academy at West Point, was an avid runner, and enjoyed hiking in the White Mountains. An age progression impression of what Murray might look like today was released in February of 2024. The New Hampshire League of Investigators, 10 retired police officers and detectives, and the Molly Bish Foundation started working on the case in 2006. Tom Shamchak, a former police chief and a member of the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts, said, "It appears that this is something beyond a mere missing persons case. Something ominous could have happened here." The Arkansas group Let's Bring Them Home offered a $75,000 reward in 2007 for information that could solve her disappearance. In October 2006, volunteers led a 2-day search within a few miles of where Murray's car was found. In the closet of an A-frame house approximately 1 mile, 1.6 kilometers, from the crash site, cadaver dogs allegedly went bonkers, possibly identifying the presence of human remains. The house had formerly been the residence of the man implicated by his brother, who had given Fred the rusty knife in 2004. A sample of carpet from the home was sent to the New Hampshire State Police, but the results were not released to the public. In July 2008, volunteers led another 2-day search through wooded areas in Haverhill. The group consisted of dog teams and licensed private investigators. Murray's case was one of many cited by proponents of a statewide cold case unit for New Hampshire in 2009. Her case was subsequently added to the newly established cold case unit later that year. In 2010, Fred publicly criticized the police investigation for treating the disappearance as a missing persons case and not a criminal matter, and called on the FBI to join the investigation. Jeffrey Strelzin said in February 2009 that the investigation was still active. "We don't know if Mora is a victim, but the state is treating it as a potential homicide. It may be a missing persons case, but it's being handled as a criminal investigation." New evidence. New evidence has come to light in the disappearance of Maura Murray, providing a potential break in the infamous, decades-old cold case that points toward a former Army cadet with a violent, checkered past. Last month, Stephen Baldwin, the former executive director of the Union County Humane Society in Ohio, was sentenced to more than 15 years in prison after being found guilty of 32 counts of animal cruelty, bribery, theft, and various other charges. Baldwin, posing as a caring lover of all creatures, concocted an elaborate scheme that saw him promise pet owners and rescue groups that he'd rehabilitate dogs or find them new homes for a fee, but instead he illegally euthanized them and pocketed the proceeds for personal use. Authorities have never been able to determine where Mora was driving to on the day she disappeared, and if she was traveling with or planning to meet up with anyone else. But investigative journalist James Renner, who has been following Mora's case for more than a decade, told DailyMail.com he believes he's unearthed a new clue that could help solve part of the Murray puzzle. "I think this is the best lead we've had in the case for 20 years, said Renner. "I'm cautiously optimistic that this could be the break we've been waiting for, but we will have to wait and see." Baldwin, 44, was first arrested in August 2020 and his fingerprints were entered into the National Automated Fingerprint Identification System (AFIS) database. Shortly after, New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit Detective Charles West contacted authorities in Ohio to inform them that Baldwin's prints matched a fingerprint recovered from inside Maura Murray's car. Campbell Police Detective Jim Conroe confirmed receiving West's call. Both Baldwin and Mora attended the U.S. Military Academy at West Point together in the early 2000s and were acquaintances. In a conversation with Renner, Baldwin claimed he and Mora were enveloped in a casual romantic relationship together while at West Point. Records obtained by Renner show that Baldwin once represented Mora as a student liaison in a disciplinary hearing at the school. Mora and Baldwin also both withdrew from West Point within weeks of one another. Mora withdrew from the school in January 2002. Baldwin tendered his resignation from West Point on December 21, 2001, school records show. The FBI visited Baldwin in spring 2024 to quiz him over his connections to Mora, for years after his prints were matched to evidence from Murray's car. Baldwin denied any involvement in her disappearance, claiming he hadn't had any contact with Mora since leaving West Point. In a later email, shared with Renner, Baldwin divulged to the FBI more details of his alleged relations with Mora. "Since we spoke, I spent a little bit of time looking into the details around Mora's disappearance, and trying to think of anything that might be even the slightest bit relevant," wrote Baldwin. Baldwin went on to claim that he never really looked into Mora's disappearance because he always had that little twinge of disappointment in how the relationship ended. He further claimed to recall a fifth-year student had been following Mora during their final year at West Point. "I wanted to say Chris was his name, I can't be positive about that, but I know there aren't many fifth-year seniors, so hopefully it's not too hard to nail that individual down," wrote Baldwin. He had been following Mora around a lot at school, and I only know that because he burst into my room one night when Mora and I were together, and I got a lot of demerits for sharing the same horizontal surface as a cadet of the opposite sex. When I asked Mora how this upperclassman knew she was in my room, she basically said that he had been stalking her but was pretty dismissive about the whole thing. Baldwin added, "I can't imagine she ever gave him the time of day, and I don't know what happened to him, and I'm not even sure what his name was. I hope that our disciplinary records might show who turned us in that night. A new lead. Renner, noting Baldwin's criminal conviction for fraud and deception, told DailyMail.com that while Baldwin's claims should be taken with a pinch of salt, they likely contain a grain of truth. Like everything with Stephen Baldwin, I suspect the details have been highly exaggerated, shared Renner. I find this story about a guy named Chris and that Mora had a stalker difficult to believe. It definitely reads to me as someone trying to steer detectives to somebody else. Renner spoke with Baldwin before his sentencing last month. Baldwin confirmed that his prints were found inside Mora's car, but claimed he'd been told by the FBI they were discovered on a CD, or a CD case. He claimed he and Mora exchanged CDs frequently at West Point, but denied sharing any contact with her after leaving the school or ever visiting her while she was at UMass. Authorities have not confirmed where Baldwin's prints were discovered within Mora's car. Baldwin has not been named publicly as a suspect or a person of interest in connection with Murray's disappearance. There were a number of CDs found in Mora's abandoned Saturn. There was a disc in the stereo player of the car in addition to a small binder of CDs. Baldwin further denied anything to do with Mora's disappearance to Renner and claimed to know little of the case, which Renner said he finds odd. He told me he didn't contact her after West Point and said he didn't even know she was missing until he saw her case on a TV special, and he never read anything about it online, said Renner. And that to me is strange, because this is a girl you apparently had a relationship with in college, and you're not at all interested in her disappearance? He had all this information about Mora's alleged stalker at West Point 20 years ago. Why didn't he share that with detectives earlier? Stephen Baldwin has made some odd choices. A checkered past. Baldwin changed his name months after Mora vanished, court records show. When he was at West Point with Mora, Baldwin's legal name was Stephen Finkelstein. He changed his surname to his mother's maiden name of Baldwin in December 2004, records show. Renner did not get a chance to ask Baldwin why he changed his name. A request for comment with an attorney listed for Baldwin has not been returned. Renner claims Baldwin shared strained relations with his mom, making the decision all the more curious. Adding to his curiosity is the fact Baldwin's mother, Barbara Baldwin, reportedly hasn't been seen or heard from since 2007. It's unclear whether a missing persons report has ever been filed for Barbara, but she was last seen in Southern California. Baldwin posted regularly about his mother's disappearance on Facebook before he was jailed. Renner interviewed Baldwin's father, who told him nobody's heard from her. As far as we know, she could be buried in the desert somewhere. Two of Baldwin's ex-partners have also died in drug and alcohol-related tragedies, Renner reports. One of the women died from an overdose, and the second in a DUI crash. Renner believes Baldwin is someone the authorities working Mora's case should be taking a close look at. As part of his own investigation, Renner is working to determine whether Baldwin ever visited New Hampshire or Amherst. If anybody can place him in New Hampshire or at the University of Massachusetts, I think he suddenly becomes the most interesting character in the story, said Renner. Stephen Baldwin is somebody that deserves more investigating, and someone they should be going back and trying to figure out his movements in 2004. He's a very interesting person. Renner said the more time that has passed since Mora vanished, the more convinced he is that she was killed. He added, I've always thought that if she had been murdered, it was by somebody she knew, because there's little chance that a serial killer happened upon her in that window of time, 5 to 7 minutes on the side of the road, and was able to take her without being seen by any witnesses. I don't buy that theory. So what I've come to believe strongly is that she was not traveling alone. I believe she was traveling with a tandem driver, and it was that driver after the accident who eventually turned back around and picked her up and then took her to another location. Maura Murray's older sister, Julie Murray, could not be reached for comment. In a podcast reinvestigating the case last year, Media Pressure, Julie shared that Mora was instant messaging with two men she knew from West Point shortly before she was seen for the last time. Julie didn't share the names of the individuals in question, referring to them only under the pseudonyms Dan and Tom. My conversation with Tom was a bit more interesting. He was also Mora's classmate at school, and he communicated with Mora on instant messenger days before she disappeared, said Julie. I asked if he ever visited Mora at UMass. He said no. But get this, I have a photo of them together at UMass in 2003. I sent him the photo, and he stopped responding. Now, I'm not saying he had anything to do with it. Maybe he was just tired of my questions, but I found this odd. Mora's struggles. A trove of police files from the Maura Murray investigation were released publicly for the first time last summer, shedding light on Mora's precarious emotional and mental state in the days before her disappearance. Renner obtained the documents via Freedom of Information Act request, and the 36-page dossier included incident reports and interviews with Mora's friends, family, and classmates. Speaking at the time, Julie said much of what was shared in the documents had already been disclosed to the family years ago, confirming what they already knew, that Mora was struggling and treading a reckless path. She had an eating disorder, and she was making poor decisions, and we knew that, shared Julie in June 2024. And it also doesn't change what we believe. The fact her body has never been found leads me to believe she took a ride with someone from the scene of the crash and was met with foul play. I honestly don't think Mora would have run off and hurt herself. She wouldn't leave our family to wonder. And there's a lot of evidence in the case that shows Mora wasn't planning to go and disappear forever. In the documents, none of the students on Mora's nursing course claimed to know her very well. They described as a diligent student who appeared withdrawn, reserved, and quiet. Authorities agreed not to press charges so long as she stayed out of trouble for 90 days. The days preceding Mora's disappearance were filled with a succession of odd-seeming behavior and strange occurrences. On February 5, 2004, Mora was on shift at her campus security job when she got a call from her older sister, Kathleen, that left Mora visibly distraught. Kathleen, who suffered from alcoholism and had just been discharged from rehab, was having relationship issues with her fiancé. According to Julie, Kathleen told Mora her fiancé had picked her up from rehab and driven straight to a liquor store. Her supervisor told police that after receiving the call, Mora was staring down at the desk muttering something to herself, per the documents. When the supervisor asked her if something was wrong, Mora shook her head. They then asked whether there had been a family emergency, to which Mora responded, "No, nothing to do with me." The supervisor recounted that she then started crying and muttering words under her breath that I could not understand. The supervisor asked Mora to go see a counselor, but she refused. Mora eventually agreed to go home early from work, and her supervisor escorted her back to her dorm. The supervisor described Mora as being in a state of clear distress and appeared very depressed. A family member later told police that Kathleen's battle with addiction had caused severe depression for Mora in the past. 2 days later, Mora's father, Fred Murray, visited Mora at college to take her car shopping. That night, they went out for dinner at a brewery and later to a liquor store. Fred returned to his hotel and loaned Mora his car for the evening so she could go to a dorm party. After the party ended, Mora attempted to drive the car back to her dad's hotel in the early hours but crashed into a guardrail. Murray was unharmed in the collision, but the car suffered $10,000 worth of damages. She was not breathalyzed at the scene and did not receive a ticket. Mora told her father about the crash the following morning, and Fred said his daughter was distraught. Fred later found out the cost of the damage was going to be covered by his insurance, so long as Mora picked up the proper accident forms from the Registry of Motor Vehicles, which she promised to do. Aside from Mora being upset about the crash, Fred told police his daughter seemed fine. What do you think about this case begging for closure? Is Mora really alive despite how long this case has been going on? With the new evidence pointing to Baldwin, is it proper to make him a suspect? Kindly subscribe, as this would help us push this to more people and save someone from danger and possibly enlighten more people about this gruesome case.